Let's dive right into this explainer and discover how the present continuous tense is essentially like a giant iceberg. I mean, it's super simple on the surface, but it is just full of these fascinating depths underneath. You probably use it, hundreds of times a day without even a second thought? Heck, you're using it while you're listening to me right now. But when we actually stop to look at the mechanics of it, it reveals so much about how we express our intentions, our emotions, and our actions in English. So, here is our roadmap. First, the anatomy of action. Second, going beyond just right now. Third, the rule-breaking verbs. And finally, shape-shifting exceptions. Let's get to it. Part 1. The anatomy of action. Let's start with the visible tip of that iceberg. The basic construction and spelling rules. The foundation here is beautifully simple. You just take the present tense of the auxiliary verb be and combine it with the present participle of your main verb. I am working, I am not working, am I working? Easy enough. But what I absolutely love here, over in the negative interrogative form, is the wonderfully quirky irregular contraction, aren't I? It completely shatters the logical pattern of am I not? I mean, am I not honestly sounds overly formal and a bit stiff to modern ears, right? So aren't I has been universally adopted. It just goes to show that language is incredibly human, and sometimes we just prefer the rhythm and bounce of how a certain phrase sounds over strict logic. Okay, let's quickly knock out the ground rules for the spelling quirks so we can get to the really juicy stuff. First up, the drop. If a verb ends in a single E, like argue, we just drop it entirely to make arguing. Next, the double. If it's a short, one-syllable verb ending in a single consonant, like run, we double that consonant to get running. And finally, the keeper. If it ends in Y, like carry, we just leave it alone and tack on the ing for carrying. Simple enough, right? Let's push past the basics. Part 2. Beyond just right now. This is where things start getting truly fascinating, because this tense stretches way beyond things happening this very second. Obviously, we use it for literal right now actions. Take this perfectly chaotic textbook example. What's the baby doing? He's tearing up a 5-pound note. It's happening right in front of your eyes, it's probably causing a mild panic, and you are reporting on it live as you scramble to rescue your cash. That is the absolute classic textbook use of the present continuous. But we also use it for general actions happening around this time. Notice that first example. I am reading a play by Shaw. You might not literally have the book in your hands at this exact moment. You could be out grabbing a coffee, but it's an ongoing action in your general present life. And crucially, we use it for definite arrangements in our immediate future plans, like saying, I'm meeting Peter tonight. The action hasn't happened yet, sure, but the arrangement is so solid, it's so locked into your calendar that English treats it as an ongoing reality right now. Now, check out how we can actually use grammar to express our mood. This is a brilliant little emotional quirk. When we pair the present continuous with the word always, we literally transform a basic fact into a statement of pure, annoyed frustration. Look at the left. Tom always goes away at weekends. That's just a dry, literal calendar fact. But switch to the right. Tom is always going away for weekends. Suddenly, just by using the continuous tense, you are heavily implying that he goes away way too often, and it's actively getting on your nerves. The grammar itself is carrying your emotional baggage. Which brings us to part 3, the rule-breaking verbs. Time to dive below the surface and meet the verbs that flat out refuse to follow the rules we just went over. So, here is the crucial point to remember. The continuous tenses are chiefly designed for deliberate actions, things we actively choose to do. Which begs a pretty big question. What in the world do we do with involuntary states? Things that just happen to us without our active permission. Well, as the source material outlines here, there is an entire category of rebel verbs that typically restrict themselves to the simple present. They reject the ing form entirely, and that's because they describe inherent states of being rather than deliberate, actionable tasks. These rebels basically fall into 4 main camps. First are involuntary senses. You just hear or see something. You don't say, I am hearing it, when a loud noise suddenly startles you. Second are deep-seated emotions. You love or hate or fear. These are states of your heart, not ongoing tasks. You wouldn't normally say, I am fearing spiders. Third, mental activities. You know or believe something to be true. You aren't actively believing it step by step. And finally, concepts of possession. A car belongs to you. It isn't actively belonging to you while it sits out in the driveway. Finally, part 4, shape-shifting exceptions. we have reached the climax of our grammar story. Because, come on, English wouldn't be English without exceptions to the exceptions, right? Some of those rebellious state of being verbs can actually be used in the continuous tense. But there's a catch. They can only do this if they entirely change their meaning. They have to shapeshift from a passive state on the left to a deliberate, intentional action on the right. Let's look at feel and smell, for example. When you say, the water feels cold, feel is just a link verb describing a passive state. The water isn't actually doing anything. But look at the other side. The doctor was feeling her pulse. Suddenly, feel becomes an active, deliberate physical interaction. The exact same goes for smell. Milk can passively smell sour, sitting idle in your fridge, but if you ask someone, why are you smelling the milk? You're describing them actively and suspiciously sniffing the carton to check if it's safe to drink. The human intent completely rewires the grammar. Similarly, taste and look do the exact same dance. A coffee simply tastes bitter as a state of its existence, but a chef is actively tasting the pudding to see if it needs a pinch more sugar. A cake passively looks good sitting on a table, but if you lose something, you actively look for your glasses. It's all about whether there is an active agent pulling the strings. Let's turn it up a notch and see how this works when we apply it to some auditory and mental shapeshifters. Here are some of the most common, and honestly, sometimes confusing, ways we stretch these specific verbs in everyday conversation. When the involuntary sense of see takes an eyeing, it magically transforms from simply using your eyeballs into attending an appointment or a visit. You aren't just visually perceiving your solicitor, you are seeing them, meaning you have a scheduled meeting right there on the calendar. And hearing, which is usually just sound waves hitting your eardrum passively, transforms into a deliberate, formal act of listening. A judge isn't just hearing noise in a room, the court is hearing evidence. And we'll wrap up with the mental verbs, which are absolutely fascinating. Think changes entirely based on what is happening inside your brain. If you state a fixed opinion, like, I think it is a stupid idea, it stays right there in the simple present. But if you were just pondering, you're lost in thought without a firm opinion yet, it becomes continuous. What are you thinking about? And expect? As a state, it means awaiting something, like, I expect a letter. But throw an ing on it, she's expecting a baby, and it transforms into the active, life-altering process of pregnancy. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. We've seen how the present continuous shifts, morphs, and bends. It bends to accommodate whether we're intentionally doing something or just passively experiencing it. It even bends to let people know we're super annoyed with how often someone skips town for the weekend. It proves that grammar isn't just a rigid textbook of rules. It is a highly flexible tool completely driven by human experience. When you speak English, you aren't just blindly following instructions. You are the one shaping the meaning. So the next time you catch yourself adding an ing to a word, ask yourself, are you just describing reality? Or are you secretly changing it?